What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have Tropical Storm Sha currently meandering out here in the central Maine development region at this current point. And then we have Invest 94L that is trying to organize and develop off the coast of Africa over here in the eastern Maine development region. And based off of what the NHC is showing, as well as a bunch of model data that we're about to show you, this thing could potentially be our first system to basically cross the MDR, impact the Lesser Antilles, and then enter the Caribbean Sea. Here's the situation we have going on right here. This is what we have starting. We're going to start with Tropical Storm Sha and then move to Invest 94L, just so that way we give you a better understanding of what's happening. So here's to start. This is Tropical Storm Sha at this current point. Maximum sustained winds are at 40 miles per hour. Minimum central pressure is 1,006 millibars. Its current location is 13.1 degrees north, 37.2 degrees west, and it's currently moving northwest at 10 miles per hour, ladies and gentlemen. So here's what we have according to the cone. It is expected to remain a tropical storm for the next day or so, and then it is expected to weaken to a tropical depression, and then a post-tropical cyclone, and then just an open wave as wind shear continues to tear it apart as we continue to speak right here. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and give you the public advisory as of right here. Here's the situation. Sha strength has been kind of strengthening up and down. It was a tropical depression briefly earlier this morning. If we go ahead and show you the archive, we'll start at 11 p.m. It weakened down to a tropical depression at this current point, and then at 5 a.m., it remained a sheer tropical depression with winds of 35 miles per hour, pressure of 1,007, and then it started to strengthen back up into a tropical storm. So Sha's not going to be lasting that long out here. It's currently located about 905 miles west of the Cabo Verde Islands at this current point. Tropical storm force winds now extend out 105 miles from the center. It was up from 90 yesterday, so definitely something to, at least for the next day, keep an eye on, as this thing's been fluctuating in intensity. So so still something to pay attention to. However, I'm not seeing this as a major threat at this current point. We'll go ahead and show you the discussion. Expected to weaken to a tropical depression in the next 36 hours, and then down to a remnant low, and then dissipate in the next 4 days. So that's the situation we have going on right here. Sha remains a poorly organized tropical cyclone on visible and infrared satellite imagery this morning. The low-level center is exposed on GOES 16 1-minute visible imagery and displaced to the west of the main convective band. The overall satellite appearance has resulted in subjective Dvorak numbers of 1.5 to 2 from the SAB respectively. However, the recent scatometer passes from both ASCAP B and C show a swath of tropical storm force winds to the northeast of the center. Given this data, this initial intensity is raised back to 35 knots or 40 miles per hour for this advisory, making Sha a tropical storm once again. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Westerly vertical wind shear is expected to persist over the system over the next day or so. This shear is forecast to then decrease along Sha's forecast track. However, the system will also be moving into a drier air mass, less favorable for upper level and a less favorable upper level environment. Simulated satellite imagery from the GFS and European models suggests that Sha will struggle to produce an organized convection in the coming days. While small intensity fluctuations are possible, as seen this morning, the NHC intensity forecast remains near the HCCA and IVN CN consensus aids, keeping Sha a tropical storm for the next day, and then weakening back to a depression, expected to dissipate into a trough by day 4. Some global models suggest that each of these transitions could occur even sooner than what is officially forecast. So that's what we have going on with Tropical Storm Sha as of right now. Now that we're going to go ahead and give you the other interesting situation I am paying attention to, and right now, this doesn't seem like a threat in the short term. In the long term, I am paying very close attention to this, primarily due to the track of this. So this is Invest 94L that is currently off the coast of Africa, south of the Cabo Verde Islands. A broad of low pressure located several hundred miles to the south of the Cabo Verde Islands continues to produce some disorganized showers and thunderstorms. Environmental conditions could support some slow development of the system over the next several days, while it moves generally westward across the the eastern and central tropical Atlantic. Formation chance in the next 48 hours is 20%. Formation chance in the next 7 days is 30%. So overall, no change going into this as of right now. However, I am paying attention to the track of this. It's pretty much due west compared to Sean, which is pretty much either west-northwest or northwest. So this is definitely something that we need to continue to keep an eye on, especially if this thing continues to move west towards the Lesser Antilles and towards the Caribbean Sea, where conditions are still incredibly good for tropical development, as you'll see later. But ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to get into this active weather period, be sure to check out my friends over at Prestige Weather Consulting. They do individual one-on-one weather consulting catered to your local area. For more information, be sure to check them out in the link in the description down below, and be sure to use the code PREDICTOR for 50% off your first month. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and show you the European model as of right now. Here's the European with Sean and then the Invest 94L. European model with Tropical Storm Sean kind of has it stagnating in intensity, then weakening down to an open wave in the next 54 hours. And then you have 94L starting to show some signs of organization. However, there is going to be a bit of shear that's going to really limit its organization, at least in the short term. But in the long term, that weakness could potentially mean a threat towards those of you who are in the Antilles in the Caribbean Sea, so please do keep that in mind. This thing moves slowly through the main development region. There's a high pressure system that starts to build up. We're just going to continue to push this thing further and further to the west. It strengthens up to a 10-20 millibar system right there, so there's plenty of steering currents for this really to continue to move further and further towards the Caribbean Sea. The European is then expected for this thing to really approach the Windward Islands as either a tropical wave or a tropical depression before entering the Caribbean Sea and potentially showing some signs of organization from then on out. Keep in mind, by the time it does enter the Caribbean Sea, we're about 8.5 days out. And about 7 days out is about right here. So pretty much where the NHC is anticipating this. So unless we see a complete collapse of the steering currents, which, by the way, the pressure system keeping these steering currents alive strengthens even further to a 1023 millibar high pressure system, which for those of you who aren't really invested into high and low pressures, that's a very strong high pressure system, especially in the Atlantic Ocean. The reason it's strong is because, well, first of all, it's a low pressure. First of all, it's not exactly the same as a low pressure system, whereas you get down to the 980s millibars. That's a strong low pressure system. Whereas high pressure systems, the difference of like 2 millibars can basically change the path of a storm entirely, in some cases by hundreds of miles. So we'll have to, that's why I'm really paying attention to it, and that's why I'm invested into this, because a 1023 millibar high pressure system is incredibly strong, and that's indicative of incredibly strong steering currents that are pushing this towards the Caribbean Sea. So that's the European model we have at this current point. Next model we're going to go ahead and show you is the GFS. GFS has continued to show more and more signs of stuff going on. The GFS is having Sean kind of just stagnate in intensity and dissipate in the next 78 hours, while 94L is slowly heading towards and further towards the Caribbean Sea and through the main development region, while really not showing that many signs of organization early on. The GFS, interestingly enough, actually has this thing developing and then just pushing completely further to the north, which I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, I don't really see that happening, because in order to see such a massive swing to the north, you're going to have to see the complete collapse of steering currents, which, as you just saw with the European model at this current point, the steering currents are incredibly strong at the high pressure's at 1023. The GFS is calling for a weaker high pressure system, which I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I've been looking with other models, and they're corroborating similar to what the European model has been calling for. So please take this model with a grain of salt. In fact, take all these models further than 5 days out with a grain of salt, and we'll keep an eye out for them. Just make sure you keep that in mind, that these kind of things are highly unpredictable that far out. I'm just here reporting what they're saying. And speaking of reporting what they're saying, we're going to report where the CMC is going with this. CMC has been a very interesting model, to say at the very least. The CMC is showing Sean just dissipating completely out in thin air, And then you have this, and then you have Invest 94L showing really signs of organization and development early on, while the CMC has also been pushing this gyre situation out here in the Caribbean Sea. Already, we're about what's this, like 5 days out or so. So it's pushing for the gyre to really start showing tropical development in the next 5 days or so. Now, keep in mind, not every model has been corroborating this. It's mainly been the CMC. However, considering how consistent it has been over the last week or so, it's definitely something you need to keep your eye on. So that's what we have. And meanwhile, this tropical system becomes a tropical storm and potentially a Category 1 hurricane before making landfall near Guadalupe, and then making really big impacts towards the Leeward Islands and potentially Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands before starting to make that turn to the north as a Category 1 hurricane. Actually, no, what's the pressure on this? It's really hard to tell. I'm going to try to zoom in on this to try to get a better understanding of this. Let's go ahead and zoom into tropical Atlantic. 973 millibar. That's around Category 2 strength on average at that point. So that's the CMC model at this current time. It's one model out of a corroboration of 5 that we show here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel, but it's definitely something to pay attention to once again as time continues to progress. Here's the NavGem model. The NavGem has continued to show more and more signs of organization and development with 94L. Meanwhile, with Sean, the NavGem is actually having this strength into a strong tropical storm before starting to show signs of stagnation. Actually, no, it's actually not. It's expected, according to the NavGem, to strengthen into a hurricane, which I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. The wind shear isn't exactly supporting Sean strengthening that much at this current point. So I would take it with a grain of salt at this time. So just, yeah, I don't buy the NavGem when it comes to Sean, but 94L could potentially be very interesting because they're showing little to no signs of organization or development until we get towards the Lesser Antilles, and there is still plenty of high pressure to really keep this thing pushing further to the west towards the Caribbean Sea, similar to what the European has been calling for. So this is something to pay attention to over the next 5 days. Really, it's going to depend on that high pressure system and how strong it gets, and if any trough interferes with that. So that's what we have with the NavGem. The next thing we're showing you is the Icon, and that's the last model we're going to show you. The last model, which is what the Icon is. The Icon is really showing Sean just stagnating in strength and just weakening after that, so I wouldn't pay too much attention to that. Meanwhile, it's showing some potential signs of organization and development, and the Icon's actually having this strengthening up into a hurricane as it's approaching the Lesser Antilles. However, I'm going to be completely honest with you. We're taking a look at the wind shear right here. I'm going to show you the wind shear in the Eastern Atlantic as well. The East Atlantic wind shear, it's off and on, but at that current point, I don't entirely trust it. Primarily due to the fluctuations that we are expecting. So for now, what I would expect is basically slow and steady development with this as this thing continues to approach the Lesser Antilles, and then from there, we'll have to see how this plays out and how the conditions get in the next 7 days. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us make more videos like these. The goal of this channel is to get more people engaged with weather. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.